Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us in this new Smart Energy Europe webinar for the launch of a new study that we released together with FTI Consulting on methodologies for a cost-reflective network tariff design. My name is Andres Pintobello. I'm the head of research and projects at Smart Energy Europe. And I'm going to be the host for today's event, which has within its presenters a whole array of interesting presentations that we will see in a minute. But first, I wanted to say a few words and introduce maybe Smarten as well. So for those of you who don't know us, we are a trade association based in Brussels, and we represent the flexible demand management industry. So all the industry, all the whole value chain of demand side flexibility, from technology providers to large energy consumers, independent aggregators, and so on. And the topic of today, for today's event is, as I said, the design of cost-reflective network tariffs. And I think this is a very relevant discussion to have today, every day, in my opinion, but today even more so. I think that the need or having robust energy grids and the crucial role they play is not in question to anybody in this webinar. I think that also events of this week are a reminder of that for those of us, or for those that are not in the weeds of this discussion on a day-to-day basis. But sorry to disappoint, this is not going to be. We're not going to focus today on blackouts and such. But not completely unrelated, we will focus on how we can ensure that grid users receive effective and efficient price signals that can reflect the physical situation of the grid, and that then they can act accordingly. So cost reflectivity network tariffs in network tariff design has largely taken a second place in the debates at the European level. We know that this is a requirement of European legislation, but this now, over the past months, where the Commission has recently prioritized tariff reform, and particularly in the recent Clean Industrial Deal and Affordable Energy Action Plan, has made it so that this has really changed. Now everybody is talking about tariffs, or we have a more active discussion about tariffs. As we will see later as well, Acer itself also sees the importance of getting the price signals right, as they call it in their new report on tariff methodologies. But this is all a clear reflection that a smartly designed network tariff and price signals are critical for Europe. Legislators, regulators, system operators, they see the importance of this. We need to incentivize grid users to be smart about their consumption. This is important, obviously, with the increased electrification. And it is important also to reduce their energy bills. It is important to have a smart tariff design to increase also competitiveness of European industry. And maybe most importantly, it is important to ensure that our grids can be managed in a robust and secure manner by our system operators. And to inform this debate, Smarten and FTI Consulting have developed a framework of different tariff design options, and we've modeled it based on real data that we will see in a moment. The recommendations of this report are based on economic principles, on regulatory best practices that we see now already in some countries. And we wanted to deliver the real system benefits, or prove the real system benefits that can come from these smart tariff designs, that those can range from really reducing peak loads to overall reducing network costs. So we will hear from this in a moment. As you can see in the agenda, we have first, I will go briefly over it. We have first the presentation of the study. Then Acer has kindly made themselves available to present their own study on tariff designs. That was launched also a couple of weeks ago. We will hear from Marcia Poletti from Octopus on why this is important, not only from the more academic side and the regulatory side, but also for consumers, and why we need them as soon as possible. And then finally, because we wanted to have a dialogue as well within all the industry, or within all the relevant players. And we invited a select group of national regulators to give and share their experience in tariff design. We've seen many very interesting things happening over the past years. Some of these are really at the forefront of tariff design in Europe. And we wanted to hear from them what their challenges were in implementing these tariffs, what are the challenges that they're still facing when trying to change tariff design at their member state level. And in that way, maybe hopefully in the audience, we can also learn from others and get this conversation going and continue this conversation over the next few months. Maybe just a few or one housekeeping rule. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask anything to the speakers. Please do that through the little question box that you have at the bottom right of the screen, not in the chat box, in the question box, because this is where I will be seeing all questions. Make sure to put them there. We will have time enough at the end of the event to ask questions to the speakers and to discuss a little bit more. But without further ado, I will then hand the floor to Tim Schittekate. He's a Senior Director of FTI Consulting. You might also know him from his role at the Florence School of Regulation. And he led this work at FTI in this collaboration with Smarten. And we will hear now from him. Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andres. Thank you very much for having me. And having had the ability to conduct this study on cost-reflective network tariffs, a topic that is very close to my deep interests. So this study has been conducted in close collaboration with Smarten and its members in the course of about, let's say, 1 year. You see here on the slide also my colleagues, Jason, Martina, and Joe, who have collaborated on this study, and the Smarten members. You can download the study online if you wish. So this has been a sort of long collaborative effort. Then first, what is the problem statement, let's say? What you see here on the slide is the load as seen as a sort of house or a feeder at, let's say, distribution level with like 100, 200 consumers. And for the longest time, consumers, here we focus on household, but equally those principles are valuable at like medium voltage or transmission. The implementation might be a bit different, but the focus here is, let's say, distribution level households and electrification. So for the longest time, those consumers had very little ability or willingness to be flexible, and price signals they received were just flat, like independent of when you consume electricity during the day, during the season, there's sort of no incentive to change your behavior. But what we have seen more recently is that load becomes a lot more flexible. Think about electrical vehicles, heat pumps, and so on. And as such, many of those consumers, they will start opting into time varying energy charges, also called dynamic energy contracts or so on. And that is great because now this flexible load is actually reacting to wholesale price signals. For example, when there's a lot of wind, they will be consuming more or charging their car. When there's a deficit, they might sort of delay their charging or their heating. But there's a problem, because if only that load is reacting to that wholesale price signal, which is locationally, let's say, very crude, it's at member state level, in most cases, it does not account for local conditions. So that's what you see on this very simple illustration. If in the neighborhood everybody with an EV is charging, waiting for that price, wholesale price, to drop and then charge all together, you can actually create fairly quickly local problems. So therefore, these sort of time varying energy contracts, while being extremely valuable, they can become a problem when they're not complemented by something that coordinates load at a local level. And that is where network tariffs come in. Besides network tariffs, there's of course also other options to do that, and those are complementary. Think about flexibility markets, think about connection, smart connection agreements, and so on. But here we focus on network tariffs. So what happens if you don't do that? Well, if you don't do that, this sort of local coordination, then fairly quickly you have local congestion. And that means you might have to build out more network than you would have had to do if you would have done that local coordination. And that means more cost, which in the end consumers will have to pay. What you also could be an issue is that the network expansion would have to go so fast that actually you cannot connect as much load or local generation as you wish. We have already seen that in some member states. For example, in the Netherlands, I think is always the classic example where that grid expansion cannot follow. So with that coordination, you can delay potentially as well network investment and sort of smoothen that wave of electrification. So if you don't do that, if you don't have these complementary network tariffs to these energy charges, then you risk slowing down electrification, and that could have major impacts. Now, what have we done in this study? We have looked at different types of network charge designs that can complement energy charges or energy prices, right? Here you can see the different designs that we looked at and the different countries where currently they are being or where they are implemented. So the most simple network tariff design, tariff zero, is the one that has been in place in many member states since forever. Is just flat volumetric network charges. The more kilowatt hours you consume, the more you're going to pay for your network, and it doesn't matter when you consume those kilowatt hours. Of course, this is not very much cost reflective, but it is the most simple thing to do. Then what you can do, like in GB, is to have some time variation, similar as for your energy prices. You can have some time variation for your network charges. Then step B is what we have seen in France since a very long time and in Flanders since more recently, is you can charge for the network at least part of the cost based on capacity. So the higher your capacity, so let's say your peak load during an hour across a month, the higher that peak load, the more you're going to pay for your network charges, which means you have the incentive to not increase that peak load unnecessarily. For example, you won't charge the maximum in 1 hour, you'll charge a little bit less across a few hours in order to avoid a high peak charge. So that gives some incentives to reduce your individual peak, but not necessarily, let's say, the network peak. Then you have more advanced capacity-based charges, such as with some time differentiation, some combinations, such as Spain and Slovenia. We have Clara and David here from those countries who can explain. They are sort of at the edge of development in the EU. And then what we've also looked at is so-called dynamic network charges. And Marcia will talk more about those. How we have implemented those is actually at local level, you forecast day ahead what the load will be, and then you send a price signal that will complement the energy price with a sort of local volumetric charge, but that will anticipate where you will see, for example, overloads during some hours because the energy price is really low. So you want to top it up a little bit to avoid that sort of herding or synchronization of local load. This is not network tariffs conflicting energy signals. No, this is network tariffs correcting to some extent energy prices to local conditions. So those are those dynamic local volumetric network charges. We have also looked at some more advanced academic concepts such as local capacity auctions or distribution locational marginal pricing. These are very interesting, but we won't expect them to be introduced anytime soon. So what we have done is we have qualitatively discussed these different network tariff designs, and we have also done quite a bit of modeling based using real data from Octopus, from consumers and their charging behavior, and so on. And we have shortlisted some of those tariffs to use in our simulation model. This selection is not like these are the best tariffs. These is just the sort of most tariff with different features that can show us the most important dynamics of these different network tariff design. So what we have taken from Octopus data is we looked at a group of 200 consumers, and then this group of 200 consumers, we have gradually populate them with EVs, and we have subjected them to a time varying energy charge, which is reflecting the wholesale price, and then complement them with different network tariff designs. And what we care about is the aggregate peak of that group of consumers. It's that hour or those hours in the year that the load of all those consumers on aggregate is highest. That is the metric we care about, because that will determine whether you have to expand your network or not. This is the result you see with the sort of tariff zero, the flat volumetric network tariffs, like currently in place for most households in Germany, Hungary. What you can see, if you increase the level of adoption of EVs, oh, sorry, I think slides, okay. If you increase the level of EVs, in the beginning, 15% of EVs across your group of 200 consumers, you don't see the aggregate peak load change. That's because the new peak load created by the EVs is somewhere around, I don't know, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. when electricity is really cheap. And because you don't have that many EVs, that new peak is not yet as large as the original peak, which is typically in the winter around 7 p.m. in Northwest Europe. But the moment you have more than 15% of EVs, and that's not that much at local level, the new peak created by that flexible load is becoming larger than your old peak, and your peak load is gradually rising, which means you got to invest more into network. You have to reinforce the network quicker. So what happens if you have a more cost-reflective network tariff, tariff B? This is the French, Flemish example. I know the implementation is different in France and Flanders, but we had to simplify a bit. So when consumers are willing to have some incentive to lower their individual peak, then somehow, because there's some correlation between their usage, the aggregate peak will decrease a bit as well. So what we see in our simulation is that the peak at 60% of EV adoption or the network investment will decrease with about 8%. This is already something that is worth it. If you then do a tariff design like Slovenia or Spain has in place, then you can further reduce that peak with about 14%, which is already quite substantial. And if you then do the same simulation and you subject those consumers to time varying energy charges and time varying network charges, dynamic network charges adjusted for local conditions, we actually simulate that you can reduce that aggregate peak load with 24%, which is, or about 24%, which is really substantial. So the total load that you consume under those four tariffs are exactly the same. You're just more intelligent in how you coordinate that load locally, so you don't have to build out the network as much. And if you quantify that in terms of euros, then you have to figure out what does it cost to expand the network, like 1 kilowatt peak load, what kind of cost it does entail. If we use certain numbers, that means that 60% of local EV adoption, that dynamic tariff per consumer would lead to about an annual reduction of its network cost that it has to pay on average of about 69 euros. So this is already quite substantial. But it's not only about reducing the network peak, it's also about delaying the expansion of the network. What you can see here is, imagine at that local feeder, you had some headroom. You had an original peak load of, let's say, 260 kilowatts, and then you had some headroom up to 330, let's say, in this example, which means under a flat, non-cost reflective network tariff, at about 25% of EV adoption, you had to expand the network because you didn't have any headroom anymore. Otherwise, you would have local problems, right? If you use a more cost-effective network tariff, you can delay that expansion up to when, for example, you adopt a little bit less than 40% of EVs. That gives you a lot of time, which is also important because if that electrification is happening fairly quickly, as we imagine it to happen, then it might be that the amount of investment you have to do at the same time is so large that you actually have logistical problems with like man force, with materials, and so on. So that delaying is also very valuable property of these dynamic network tariffs, or more cost-reflective network tariffs in general. Now, cost effectiveness is the key criteria. It's the most important thing from an efficiency perspective. But of course, there's also other considerations, and I'm sure the regulators can talk more about this when you revise your network tariff. And we looked at three criteria. One is cost reflectiveness. The other one is how a network tariff impacts the cost for electrification. And then we also impact how a network tariff creates distributional impacts. If you go from one network charge to another network charge, it will have impacts on the consumers that, for example, don't electrify. Even though they don't change their behavior, they might see changes in the amount of network charges they have to pay, and that can create political resistance. So it's also an important one to consider. What you can see here from the diagram is sort of the larger out of the circle, the better the network tariff design performs for those criteria. This is an example for 5% of EV adoption. So at very low EV adoption, even a flat network tariff is as efficient as a more advanced one because you don't have those problems yet. And it's pretty good at flat network tariff at distributional impact because it doesn't change how much like non-electrifying consumers have to pay, but it's really bad at electrification incentives because basically EV adopters or heat pump adopters, they don't have any chance to reduce their network cost by charging smart because they simply cannot, and therefore electrification is quite expensive, which I think would be the first driver to adopt a more cost-effective network tariff. If you look at those other more cost-reflective ones, you can see that they will create some distributional impacts, but they will make electrification cheaper. For example, the most advanced network tariff, the dynamic ones, it will be really good to incentivize electrification, but it will create quite a lot of distributional consequences when you have very low adoption of electrification or EVs in this example. When you go to more adoption, this flat volumetric network tariff becomes more problematic because now you lose in terms of cost reflectiveness as well, on top of making electrification more expensive. So it only performs pretty well at sort of not increasing the cost of those non-electrifying consumers. That's because the consumers who electrify, they have to pay too much. So they're basically being taxed, and therefore you will stop electrification. At the same time, you give them the wrong incentives and your total network cost will increase. So at this point, with about 20% of EV adoption, it makes sense to, for example, adopt the Slovenian or Spanish example. Now, when you go to really high adoption of EVs or other electrification appliances, the flat network tariff is really problematic because you don't send the right signals, you have to overbuild the network, you block electrification. The only thing you kind of keep in check is not massively increasing the bill of those non-electrifying consumers. And at that point, the network tariff, the most cost-effective network tariff, because it's able to reduce total network cost, it also creates lower distributional consequences. So at that point in time, for about 40% of EV adoption, it makes sense to think about those very cost-effective network tariffs, because on all criteria, they start performing quite satisfactory, while the other network tariff designs have trouble following. So we have all this analysis in the report, you can read about it. And then out of this quantitative analysis, we made a roadmap, basically advising member states on what kind of steps they can make from revising their network tariff design as they have today to the future. We don't advise this roadmap to be taken step by step. It's perfectly sensible to do some leapfrogging, because as we know, when you go from one network tariff design to another, you're like 5 years, if you're lucky, in terms of 5 years later. If you're unlucky, maybe 7 or 8 years. And by that time, the situation of electrification and your local networks can look already quite different. So you start with flat volumetric network tariffs, as we have, for example, Germany or Hungary. Many member states are already beyond that. Then if you want to reduce cost of electrification, you do, for example, time of use volumetric or a simple capacity tariff. You'll get some resistance in terms of distributional impacts, but it's important to overcome those. And you'll need some sense of smart meters, which is a prerequisite for more intelligent network tariffs. Then if, as electrification increases slightly, you want to make those capacity-based charges or those volumetric um, time varying volumetric network charge is more cost reflective, you introduce a sort of Spanish Slovenian design. And then as electrification again increases, then there's no other way anymore to adopt something more cost reflective, such as those dynamic volumetric network tariffs. They are perceived to be complex, but that's where there's a role of the retailer. Marcia will tell you about it. And it also requires some smart grids, because it means that DSOs, need to know what is going on in their local networks, because they have to forecast local conditions in order to set those network tariffs more intelligent. Then in very first stages of electrification, you can think about more complex things like local capacity auctions and so on. The complexity increases because at that point, what happens at local level needs to coordinate very closely with what happens at transmission level or at wholesale level. And that's the whole TSO, DSO coordination that has to become seamless, which is something to maybe worry about in, let's say, 10 years or so. But we, in this study, focused mostly of going from step number 0 to step number 3. So as I already said, there's good reasons for some countries when you're at tariff 0 or 1 to leapfrog directly 2 steps ahead or so. This was the very brief summary of the study. I encourage you all to download it if you have more interest. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Tim, for this quick presentation. Indeed, if you want to download the study, it's available already at Smarten's website. So please go ahead. There you have, I saw already a question in the chat box about the methodologies. This is all included in the study. And of course, if you have further questions, I'm sure that Tim and the team can help you out there. If you have any further questions to Tim, please put them in the questions box. We will try to answer a few at the end of the presentations, but now we will move forward with the next presentation, and for that I will ask Akos Hofstadter to join the stage. He's a policy officer at Acer, who has very recently released their own study on tariffs. And I will let him go over it and present it to us. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm also very happy to be here and present our Acer findings and conclusions regarding this very important topic. I would like to start with the context. So clearly, meeting our ambitious climate and energy goals, we need a lot of additional capacity. It's a challenge to accommodate all these growing demand and generation and keeping the cost down. So what we foreseen is that the annual grid costs are expected to increase quite significantly. In the high investment scenarios, it even risks to double by 2050. So this is very important that we provide the economic signals to all the actors, system operators, network users, and try to mitigate this cost increase. And one of the major tools to incentivize this efficient grid use of the current grid and therefore limit the need for additional capacity building is network tariffs. And if it's true that the charges, the share of these charges in the final bill will increase, which is expected, and there will be more increasing flexibility from the assets connected to the grid, then actually the impact of these tariffs and its importance can further grow. Of course, we admit there are challenges. It's a very complex process setting the tariffs. It's not easy to find one design-fits-all solutions, and the local power system context matters a lot. But still, the way ahead is very clear. The EU law has no binding harmonization via network code on the electricity network tariffs. It doesn't mean there are no relevant EU provisions. There is the tariff setting principles which are set by law. And there is a focus on transparency, sharing best practices. And this is where Acer comes into the picture, as we have to issue every 2 years a review of the national tariff methodologies and share practices. Our recent report was published just in March. And in the next slides, I would like to just give you a short insight on some aspects of it, just as a teaser. So the first thing would be the cost cascading, which is a very important element of cost reflectivity. In all countries, it is done in a top-down paradigm, which shows very well the historical setup of the electricity grids. The generation is connected at higher voltage levels, while most of the consumption takes place at lower voltage levels. The question here, which is very interesting, what happens if there are more and more distributed generation appears in the network, and maybe you would observe some inverted power flows. Also, what about those network users who are assumed to consume the generation locally generated? So this may challenge the current practices. We advise NRAs to keep an eye on it and constantly monitor these developments. The next topic, which is usually very sensitive, is the injection charges. So currently in half of the member states, the producers do not pay use of network charges. They pay for the connection, of course. But we often see that the costs of network reinforcements are driven by injection in certain parts of the grid. So the question comes, if they are not exposed to network charges regarding their use of the grid and where to locate to the grid, how to provide efficiency signals and how to ensure that the grid build out is efficient. The next topic is exemptions and discounts, which we also looked into in great details. It's clear that some specific tariff regimes are not cost reflective. For example, net metering. It's already phased out for new users from the EU legislation, but still it's there for the users who were already part of these regimes. But there are also some other cases, and it's not always straightforward to decide what is an undue discount or an exemption and what is simply a difference because of the different cost impacts. So this is what we try to emphasize here, that any exemption, discount, specific treatment has to be justified by the system beneficial impacts. If it's not, if we shield certain network users from the costs they cause to the network, it is actually a zero sum, not a zero sum, but a negative sum game, because overall the network costs will go up. We also see that there is a gradual shift toward more power-based charges, which is deemed appropriate by Acer. Certainly it comes with some caveats, because some design of power-based charges can also be a barrier of demand response, which is certainly not the intention. So these design elements, in order to be cost reflective, has to be considered. And one of these design elements is certainly the time of use. We see that the bulk of the network costs show correlation with the system peak. And that's why we advise to link the network cost allocation to the network peak usage. So to reflect it, that at different points in time, there are different costs by using the network. What we see in Europe is that the static time of use signals are widespread. They are used by the vast majority of the countries, in particular in distribution. These are often peak-off-peak tariffs coexisting with other signals like seasonal differentiations. At the same time, we see that the more dynamic network tariffs are very rare. Of course, they are mainly related to reasons of complexity and ability sometimes to respond to these signals and predictability of these signals. The last topic I brought today was the locational signals. Here we see that in Europe, only in a few countries, such locational signals apply in the network tariffs. There are a lot of cases of deep connection charges, which also provide some locational signals. But in the use of network charges, there is such only in a few countries. Instead of these locational signals, which admittedly are very complex, the network topology changes all the time, these signals could not easily be stable, or they risk not to be such. So these are the reasons often behind not to apply them. In some other cases, it's also prevented by the national law to apply such signals. So what we see rather is that the flexible connection agreements are used as an alternative tool to ensure that the generation and the demand is siting to the locations where there is capacity available for them. From ACE's side, we recommend NRAs to consider these locational-based signals, where there is a need for them, what possibilities they have. One of the options they could provide is indeed these deep connection charges, as long as also the cost sharing is taken into account between the users coming first and later. I think I reached the end. There was one slide left, but I think the slides moved, which is just simply to emphasize that these network tariffs are ongoing. Several member states reported that they introduced major changes recently. We are happy to see that these changes are often in line with the ACER recommendations. At the same time, we see that there are oppositions which can slow down or even reverse these tariff reforms. So we really emphasize that the regulatory independence is very important to ensure. And also for NRAs, we recommend that they should very early stages engage with the stakeholders, explain the benefits of these tariff reforms, and make well-informed decisions by taking into account those inputs. We try to contribute to this work of the NRAs and other stakeholders, not only by this report, but in the future establishing a centralized EU database repository where major tariff information would be available. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion during this event.
Thanks a lot, Akos. Thank you for this overview. And please go ahead and download the report from ACER. It's a very interesting read and gives a very good overview of what the current situation is. And it's a very good bind in with the previously presented study by Tim to see what is happening around Europe. And I do keep this message from Marcos very important: the regulatory independence, and also to be bold and move forward with the tariff reforms, taking into consideration the needs of each of your grids. Good. With that, I think we can move to the next speaker. Now we have Marcia Poletti. She's the head of European System Change at Octopus. Octopus played a key role in this report because they provided the real life, real experience data that was used for the modeling of the FTI study, so that we can also back it up with this real experience. So we're very grateful for that. But Marcia will now talk to us about why we need to act quickly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andres. And also thank you, Tim and Akos, for really interesting presentations. I'd like now to speak from a practitioner's point of view. And I think it's sort of opportune that we're doing this 2 days after the massive Spanish blackout, because I think we really need to be thinking about designing the markets and the mechanisms for that post-transition electricity grids. And before the blackout happened, I had already said in this presentation why we needed dynamic grid tariffs yesterday, because I think we need to get organized now before the massive growth of EVs and other smart devices comes across us. So very quickly, as an overview, Octopus is an energy tech company. So we're really focused on using technology to drive the global green transition. And the key there is making it cheaper and faster for citizens and the planet. We've only been operating since 2016, and arguably we're the first fully integrated post-transition energy company. We're operating in 27 different countries. we've got 8.8 million retail customers globally and around 7 billion US assets of renewable generation under management. So why do we need dynamic pricing, and why do we need it now? I'm going to talk through these 4 points, but basically we're seeing rapid growth of smart assets. We're seeing increasing low and negative wholesale prices. We're seeing rapid growth of managed smart assets, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we're seeing increasing network congestion at peak. So despite all the negative press in newspapers, actually consumers are buying EVs, and they're buying them even though the sticker price of EVs is still higher than the comparable internal combustion engine. That's forecast to change over the next couple of years across Europe. And as soon as that does, we expect the growth to be even steeper. And you can see this being borne out by forecasts. This one's from the IEA, but the forecasts are pretty standard. This growth will continue. What we're also really aware of, particularly as an energy supplier, is the negative or low-priced electricity that we're seeing. This only goes out to 2024, but the story is the same already. And for a whole variety of reasons, this increase in negative and near zero prices will continue. This picture is from the UK, but the same is true across Europe. But critically, we're seeing exponential growth of managed smart load. So this figure comes from January. We're probably sitting closer to 1.7 gigawatts now. And what I mean by managed load is consumers give us control of their devices. They allow us to steer when their EV charge or when their heat pump heats or how and when their battery is charged, so long as we meet their needs first. And that's hugely generous of consumers. And so because of their generosity, we then give customers really significant savings. So in the UK, customers save around £1,200, so around 1,400 euros, if they allow us to smart charge their car. And what does that mean? What does the smart charging mean? And why is it important for grids? Well, day ahead, we'll forecast when people are going to arrive home and plug in their car and how much energy they're going to need. And, you know, we know already the size of their charger. So we can create essentially using AI, a forecast of the flexibility that they have. We then look at the day ahead price, and you can see there's this nice low price period here. And we say, well, what is the cheapest way we can supply that EV? And then we do that. We go into day ahead markets and we will buy really cheap electricity. And we will schedule the EVs so that they consume the maximum amount of energy when it's cheap, and that they do that before the customer needs it. And you can see that flexibility envelope, you can see customers begin to unplug their cars in the morning as they leave. So that's brilliant. We're using up energy when it's cheap and green. We're passing those benefits on to consumers. So why is it a problem? Well, the problem is that little swing was 500 megawatts. And that's this year. You know, next year it'll be a gigawatt swing. And that might be good for the grid if it happens to be somewhere where the grid is completely uncongested, or if it's happening overnight, but it might not. And the problem with a flat network tariff is we have no information about what's happening at the grid. And because we have no information, we aren't able to do things that are grid friendly. this is just exactly the same slide, but it's actually with real numbers. And that particular pattern was on the 16th of February. So why am I going on about this? If you look at the DSO Observatory from 2018, actually it looks like there's lots of space on low voltage networks. The average utilization was between 2 and 21%. Now, the comparable figures for the UK are around 40%, so roughly double the highest value across Europe. So not a problem. Well, the problem happens because although there is lots of space, the network peaks are happening in quite short time periods. And what we need information about that peak so we can avoid it, because there's lots of this unused network capacity that we can play around with. We can get customers to charge. So, and to make that problem concrete and real, what's the problem? Well, currently, the average household peak, and it depends on the country and it depends on the underlying networks, but the average household peak is around 3.5 kilowatts. In the UK, it's closer to 1.5 kilowatt. But when you add all the low carbon technologies to that household, so you add an EV charger, which is between 7 and 11 kilowatts, a home battery, which might be between 2 and 4 kilowatts, a heat pump, which might be between 2 and 4 kilowatts, and your peak demand suddenly goes from 3.5 to 21. So you're seeing a 6-fold rise. And because apart from the household peak, all of these other assets can be steered and can be managed and will respond to the wholesale price. And so you take away all this diversity. And by taking away that diversity, you start creating problem for networks. So, one way of helping manage the problem is to do this dynamic retail tariff. But it sounds really complicated. And so the next question, and maybe the most important question, is it difficult? And actually, the answer is a little bit surprising. Because for anyone who is already managing devices in response to the wholesale price, so that's people like TIBA or OVO or Octopus or NG or any of those, there are lots and lots of people who are already doing this. They just add this dynamic network price to the dynamic wholesale price. It's a simple sum, so it's easy for them to do. For a network, well, and this might be surprising, it's actually pretty easy. In the most simplest form, you could say, let me look at what the network looked like this time last week, at whatever voltage level you've got information for. You can then use that to provide a day ahead network price. And if a network price, because network price reform can be pretty difficult, you can say, well, look, let's create an overlay. Instead of having this dynamic price, which changes to reflect the congestion levels, let's give consumers a little bit of money when the network is unloaded at off-peak times, and let's give them a penalty for charging at peak. And so most of the time, they'll be very happy to move to charging at low peak times, and you do want them to see that there is a cost to charging at peak. And you contrast that with an approach where, for instance, networks are paying consumers for control of device. So, for instance, in Germany, under Section 14A, consumers are paid 100 euros. But that money could be used instead to get them to do smart things. So it's easy for independent aggregators and suppliers. It's easy for network companies. And actually, I'd argue it's easy for customers, because either their device is managed by an aggregator or a supplier, or they have something like a home energy management system, which can take a dynamic tariff, and they just add the dynamic tariff, the dynamic network tariff, to that dynamic wholesale tariff. And you can see already in, for instance, Switzerland with Group E, they have an API which has the wholesale price and the network price. So yes, I'd argue it's really easy to do. And if you want to make it even simpler, you create something which is voluntary. So consumers with EVs or consumers with other electrical flexible kit, such as, for instance, storage heaters in the UK, or batteries, or any of those smart devices, you give them, so you have a voluntary sign up, and you have an overlay on top of the network price. And then the last question that you need to consider is, does it work? And we've done a number of studies now, one with UKPN, so a United Kingdom network, one with SSEN, so another UK DSO in the north. And the top graph is the control group, and the blue line is the wholesale price plus a flat network charge. And you can see all the charging happens as that price goes down to zero. For the optimized group, we fed in not only the wholesale price, but this dynamic grid tariff. And you can see down the bottom, congestion on this particular substation increases at midnight, probably because other customers are on a time of use tariff. So what these devices that we're seeing congestion did is they dropped their consumption during these higher cost periods. So having a dynamic network price provides really good information that enables smart devices to respond. It's also cost effective, particularly if you do network reform, because the people who create the congestion then have to pay for it. So in a sense, it's sort of a no-brainer. So in conclusion, day-ahead dynamic tariffs give smart devices the information in order to behave in a grid-friendly manner. As you can see from Tim's study, it reduces the network costs by almost 20%. And it reduces network peak, which is a key driver of investment across the system, by around 25%. Having information about the network and wholesale markets enables the right trade-offs to be made to create a lower cost system. So, dynamic tariffs create a lower cost system, and we should be trying pilots and working effectively across the board to do this as soon as we can. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Marcia, for these insights, and thank you for this message that it is easier than it looks like. Now we have actually 4 speakers from national regulators that might actually contest that assertion or might have more doubts. But in any case, they will give us their perspective of how they implemented the tariffs that they have in their countries and what are the challenges or opportunities that they've faced. And first in line, we have Clara Isabel González Bravo. She's the head of regulated prices unit at the CNMC, the Spanish regulator. And thank you, Clara, for making the time today. I imagine as any Spaniard in the energy system today, you're probably swamped not only with work, but also with family members and friends asking you to enlighten them. But we will hear from you, from the Spanish regulator. They are one of the tariffs that we highlighted as the best practices or more advanced ones in our report. And yeah, I will give the floor to you, Clara. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm going to talk about the Spanish case. As you mentioned, in the current process of transition towards a low emission economy, the establishment of network tariff methodology is have a special importance. The electrification of the economy implies the electricity consumers is going to be bigger. Then if we are able to give a price signal to consumers in the way we are able to induce shifts from peak hours to hours of less demands, the need of investment in networks will be less, as you mentioned before. Then in Spain, the objective was this, no? The idea is establish a methodology with the objective to maximize grid utilization in order to minimize the needs of additional investment on networks. Then we establish a methodology in that way that all consumers have time of use tariffs. The Electricity Act established a single national network tariff. Because of this, the network tariffs provides pricing by time of use, but no by localizations. We have all consumers have time of use tariff with 6 periods in both capacity and energy, with the exception of household consumers, which tariffs have two periods in capacity and 3 in energy. The main objective of introduction the differentiation of capacity charge for households was to facilitate the introduction or to provide recharging the electric vehicle in off-peak hours at low cost. The methodology, briefly, is determined based on 3 elements. First, the most cost driver is the capacity demanded by users. Then the network costs are primarily allocated to capacity charge. 75% of network costs are allocated to capacity charge and only 25% to energy. Second, the network costs are allocated by periods, taking into account the share of each voltage level in the higher in the 866 hours or higher demand. Finally, the cost of each voltage level and periods is allocated at a voltage level itself, and the lower voltage level take into account the capacity demanded on the day of maximum demand of each period according to a simplified model. And problems, yes, we have problems to introduce the new structure. At first, the new tariff structure was strongly rejected on several fronts. No, on one hand, the high weight of the capacity charge was widely criticized. In the belief the consumers, especially household consumers, respond better to price signal in the energy charge. On the other hand, the mandatory implementation of time of use discrimination was misinterpreted, with the debate focusing on negative aspects, since the saving would be interpreted as displacing the household task, such as ironing or to do the laundry at 3 a.m. or on weekends. And finally, the people don't understand why the peak period of the network tariff coincided with the periods of greatest renewable energy penetration, when the energy prices were in the market were cheaper. In any case, despite the initial reactions, the price the signal seems to have worked. It's true, it's difficult to assess the success of the pricing signal, because the new structure have coincide in time with a scenario of high market price, and with several measures implemented by governments to mitigate the impact of this higher price on consumers. But as can you see in these graphs, we found that the morning peak has significantly reduced. We also see the consumption in the off-peak periods has increased, but we don't have many success in the peak of the afternoon. We think we have to increase the price signal in afternoon peak for future. In summary, the Spanish experience is that despite the initial reaction, the price signals has, and the complex situation, because the introduction of the new structure was complicated, but the early indication suggests that the price signals has work and is beginning to influence in consumption patterns and that is a key element towards gain efficiency in grid investment and to facilitate the energy transition. And that's all for my part.
Thanks a lot, Clara, for sharing the Spanish experience. And I think that a very important message here is as well that even if something works, it's very important on how to communicate it with consumers to increase their acceptability. And I saw some questions as well in the chat about consumer acceptability. And I think there's a lot to learn also from the Spanish experience on this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to the next experience from an energy regulator, and we have for this David Batic the head of development and market monitoring department at the Slovenian Energy Agency. Another of the countries that we highlighted as the best practices, let's say, in tariff design today. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for having me and the opportunity to represent the Slovenian case. I will provide an umbrella view over our experience and complement Clara a bit, because the design of our new tariff methodology is similar to Spanish one. Yeah, so maybe let's begin with our motivation for the tariff reform. I start with maybe the reflection from the team's presentation. Definitely, we need 5 years to design, enforce, and then to start to use the new methodology. And you see, we designed in 2020, enforced in November 22, and then finally the new reform entered into use October last year. So actually, we are almost 5 years from the decision that we change and improve the old tariff methodology. Why we did that? Because we had over 20 years old methodology in place, which was not fit for the purpose anymore. We wanted to incentivize more efficient use of networks to reduce needed grid reinforcements, to mitigate the need for incremental network investments, and support the electrification efforts in the most cost-efficient manner. Also, we wanted to trigger the emergence of active customers and efficient demand response with cost-reflective network price signals, especially in the absence of proper market retail price signals for most of the smallest customers. The prerequisite, having smart metering in place, is something needed. We wanted to increase the benefit utilization of that. We have 95% of customers equipped with smart meters today, so no obstacles for introducing more advanced network charges anymore. And a secondary goal, to increase the level of digitalization in distribution within the interoperability framework, and to incentivize the development of new energy services and market-based products for energy management, user flexibility, and to develop the new retail energy supply products like dynamic prices that complement the new tariff design for electricity network charge. We faced a lot of challenges in this path, in these 5 years since we decided to change. Clara mentioned few problems that we also faced, but if I shortly go through different phases and the key challenges we have faced in the implementation and public consultation phase, we learned that the 15-minute meter data processing in distribution can be quite challenging, mostly because of the communication technology used for advanced metering infrastructure. So power line communication is actually prone to interferences, and then of course there must be a special care provided to the data quality insurance. So we had to design the fallback network tariffs also for customers without proper monthly data quality, which actually increased the complexity of the reform. And of course, all the information systems had to adapt to a new network charge. It was quite challenging and time-consuming activity, affected all the key stakeholders in the sector. Then in dissemination in the transition phase, For smallest customers, it was really hard to explain the difference between the peak power demand and the energy consumption in terms of their demand response. Of course, if the market is mature and aggregation is in place and available for everybody for a nice price, then this is not an issue. But if the demand response is actually applicable without these services, then this is quite challenging. Also, what was the challenge was the fact that key stakeholders, energy suppliers, and government rejected common dissemination campaign. This would be much more effective if we would be doing it together. And then just before entering into use, we have faced the last-minute opposition of minor customer groups that lost unjustified benefits from the past by increased cost reflectivity of new tariffs. And then within these last 6 months of new network tariff usage, we have faced unexpected politically driven interventions into tariffs, temporary elimination of seasonal tariff differentiation, and introduction of unjustified provisions for incentivizing certain technology into the new energy law proposals, etc. So we have to deal also with this. If we look at the impact assessments and lessons learned for the to conclude this presentation, we are actually monitoring the impacts based on 13 umbrella KPIs on monthly basis. And what we see, we actually observed good results. First of all, here on the left side, you can see the number of active customers. We observed the intensive emerge of active customers. So you see that the number of customers responding to the network price signals are actually increasing rapidly over the time. We measured 65% of fully efficient demand response based of the network price signals. So this is demand response without excessive power charges, which happened if demand is exceeding the agreed contracted power. Also, we measured on aggregated level 2.5% anticipated reduction of system peak load based on changed power subscriptions. So these power subscriptions lowered in the time block of the highest stress of the network for 2025, which actually can be transformed to the 260 million euros of avoided incremental network costs, which is quite good results if we consider that we are actually facing the raise of investments in amount of almost 4 billion euros since until the 2032 year 2032. So we are quite happy with these results, but the lessons learned are also there. So if the increased cost effectivity is accompanied with the redistribution of network costs among customer groups, this is what happened in Slovenia because of the availability of the granular metered data. The acceptability of the reform may be very challenging because this redistribution of the cost is actually done causing the opposition of some customer groups. And also policy-driven incentives, which are there for incentivizing the selected technologies and favoring partial interest by introducing unjustified lower or discriminatory tariffs overriding the cost-reflective tariff methodologies, are the real threat towards the increased efficiency in the network use. We heard that before in the previous great presentations, and our case is actually confirming that this is a real threat in this roadmap towards the increased efficiency, which is actually what I think should be the common goal in the era of the green transformation, in order not to put too much burden and stress and financial overload to the customers. This would be from my side all, and I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, David, for your insights. Very interesting, the resistances or the challenges that you faced. And now we move on to the next speaker who actually might be facing these challenges as we speak. This is Rens van de Ven. He's a senior economist, energy department at the Dutch regulator, and they're actually currently working on a tariff reform. So eager to hear what it is that you're facing now.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some experience with you all and learn from experiences of others. I will try to keep it short, since I see that we're running quite a bit behind the schedule already. Let's see if I can move to the next one. Yes, there it is. So I will share some experiences on tariff reform in the Netherlands. To be honest, we come from a situation where we have actually quite a simple basic tariff design, which was stable for many years and worked well in the past. It was based on mostly power-based tariffs for large consumers, and capacity-based, so the capacity of the connection based tariffs for small consumers, which, like I said, in the past worked fine. It gave an incentive at least on to reduce your individual peak. But yeah, I think as stressed before during this event, the situation of the congestion grids made clear that there was a need for tariff reform to improve cost effectivity and stimulate efficient grid use. And yeah, most important aspect was that the incentive would not only be to reduce the individual peak, but also to reduce the system peak. So and at the same time also provide the opportunity to have maybe a higher individual peak outside the system peak. Well, this is what the time of use signals are for. So we are moving now to a system with more differentiated tariffs. We're not doing this in one big bang with a full reform of the tariffs, but we're doing it gradually with subsequent changes in the tariff design. First of all, with the introduction of time of use tariffs on TSO level, which is effective for the start of this year. Still, tariffs are capacity based, and there's a 5-period system with higher prices, higher tariffs in periods of higher. Now cannot see my own slide anymore. There's something that went wrong. Let me just. Yeah, sorry about that. So still capacity-based tariffs on the TSO level, but 5 periods, where the level of the tariff varies with the room there is in the grid. On the DSO level, we're also working towards time of use tariffs for large consumers on the DSO grid. It will be a similar system as on the TSO level, so capacity-based or mostly capacity-based time of use tariffs. 5 periods also, and this is expected to be introduced in 2027. For small consumers, so mostly households, we're also working now on a new tariff design. Most likely it's going to be energy based. We've heard already some arguments pro capacity, pro energy. I think for us at this point of time, our current line of thinking is that what is crucial in the new tariff structure is a time of use element. Well, we think that capacity-based tariffs are more complicated, less intuitive for households than energy-based tariffs. So the combination of capacity-based and time of use might be overly complex. So that's why our current line of thinking is to work with energy-based tariffs with time of use elements. And this is expected in 2028. The number of periods I will come back to later, so I will not say this is still in the discussion, but I will come back to it later. Something else is that we are also preparing for the introduction of injection tariff, something that we currently do not have, but I think also as Ecos mentioned, it is injection is a cost driver also, and if you want to be able to give incentives to producers to use the grid efficiently, there needs to be a tariff. One last thing is that we're also currently investigating, so this is still an early stage, locational signals in tariffs. But from this, which is not on this slide, because the slide focuses on tariffs, we're also have been working on the introduction of a number of various non-firm transport rights or flexible connection agreements, which give more, even a stronger incentive to use the grid efficiently. They basically provide a really different product with which you cannot use the grid in certain hours, and it gives a much stronger also financial incentive in the sense that it gives us a high discount on the tariff. Then I think, because on tariffs we've heard different experts. What I can contribute here is also our experiences with challenges of tariff reform. So here there are a few. I think that the speakers from Slovenia and Spain, they mentioned some of them as well. So first of all, design choices in the sense of the number of periods in the time of use system, the difference in tariff level for peak and off peak. Also, if you have different tariffs, or for example, contracted capacity, maximum peak tariff, where do you apply time of use to all of them or to some of them? So these are design choices that don't always have an objective answer. So this is one challenge. I think of the challenges mentioned here, actually the least difficult one, since in the end it's still technical. Then other challenges, well, redistribution effects. Think about, for example, the introduction of an injection tariff and the consequence for existing production facilities that are suddenly faced with such a tariff. Think also about the introduction of time of use tariffs and consumers that are using the grid in the peak period and don't have the opportunity or the possibility to change that behavior. Fairness is also a very important aspect and a challenge. I think if you, especially for example in the context of locational signals, the case is very easy to make that it matters where you connect. It matters if you consume electricity close to a production facility. But is it also, in that sense, from a cost-reflective point of view, that could mean a different tariff? But is this also fair, or do you want to, provide the same kind of the possibility to connect to the grid at the same price in every part of the country? And then last, increasing complexity. So, like I said, especially in our case, we come from a very simple, basic system. And the steps that we're now taking will make the system more complex. For large consumers, that should not be a problem, but especially for small consumers, households, that can be a challenge. And as I said, I would come back to the current ideas for the time of use tariffs for our households and other small consumers. One idea that is currently being discussed is a hourly time of use static tariff. So this is not dynamic even yet, but this is still static. The question is this acceptable for households? Can they understand this? Can they act on this? Well, I think from one of the previous presentations, if you have help from Octopus, it shouldn't be a problem. I think also if you ask the question in a room full of energy professionals, such as we are here, the answer might also be no, it's not too complex. But the question is also for which group of households do you have in mind when you answer this question? So I think there are different questions to this, different answers to these questions. So some food for thought, I think. And I will leave it at this.
Thank you very much, Rens, and good luck also for the next steps of this process. It can be challenging, I imagine. Now, last but not least, we will have a short presentation by Jesper Hivel Pedersen. He's a special advisor at the Danish regulatory agency, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce, despite the best efforts of my Danish colleague to teach me how to. But I will leave the floor to you, Jesper.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for some great presentations, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my perspective of some of the challenging that we are currently facing. So I have chosen to focus on 3 challenges, and the first of it is how to balance injection charges with withdrawal charges. So the 1st of January 2023, we ratified injection charges for producers, but they are currently very much lower than the withdrawal charges for consumers, like 20 times lower. And we find this particularly challenging because we think that the normative economic literature provides very little limited guidance on this, and it also raises some perspectives that are really cross-national. So it's not only about whether our tariffs in Denmark are cost-effective to a Danish situation, but it's also about the international coordination. So as a national regulator, that we would like to see some ASA perspectives on this, of course. With respect to connection charges, we have ratified the use of connection charges with limited use. So users, they only have a limited grid use, and they can be decoupled in the times when the grid is under stress. This is a new product that has been ratified, and it's we think that this is raising a lot of new issues as well. It's a very particular product to price, and we are challenged with respect to evaluating whether the tariff reductions that producers they get they actually correspond to the expected gains in efficiency. Yeah. And finally, with the introduction of these injection charges, we have also introduced geographically differentiated tariffs. And one of the consequences this has created is that we have introduced production-dominated areas. And for these areas, the electricity is assumed to flow in the opposite direction. So from distributional level to a transmission level, and this is inconsistent with the assumptions on flow in some of the other tariff methodologies. And of course, since this challenges a very basic principle, the cascade principle, we think that this is a problem that we would like to see addressed in future reflections. Okay, that was it. Very short. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesper. Short but efficient and clear messages. Thank you for that. Now, I would have liked to have a good round of discussion now, but we're sadly 15 minutes over time already. But I think it was quite important to leave room to the participants to share their experience, because we did learn a lot from them. We do not have a time for the panel discussion, but I will leave this slide on to thank everybody that presented. Thank you a lot for your time and for your participation. You can reach out to them. Please do so if you have questions. I've also taken note of all the questions that went unanswered in the chat. will put you in contact with the speakers that you address them to, and hopefully they can reply to you in private. And otherwise, I would like to close with a few short messages from the last presentations. We've seen the importance of tariffs on a smart tariff design from the presentation from Tim. Please go ahead and look at the report as well. You have all the information there. But then we saw all the challenges that we can also face. The consumer acceptability and education is key in any of these reforms. And it takes longer than we would all like. From the design to the implementation, we saw that it can take at least 5 years. So we do need to act as soon as possible. And finally, also the regulatory independence is key to avoid introducing other variables into the tariffs and the cost reflectivity of these tariffs. We need to ensure that there's no mismatching of incentives with different support schemes that might be introduced, or with political pressure that might be sometimes even misguided. But the last point, and it's a positive one that I do want to highlight, is the one that Marcia said. It is easier than it looks. We will obviously leave the technical implementation to the experts, and they might very much disagree with us, but it is easier than it looks, and we do need them yesterday. So we do need cost-reflective network tariffs for yesterday. So with that message, I would like to thank everybody again for their time, all members of the audience that took their time to listen to us today. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I left my email address in the chat box, but you can also reach out to all the speakers. Thank you again, and have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.